Okay, so now we're going to talk about Section K, staking and survey. So the first letter here, K-1, staking boundary points. Typically we put NA here because staking is literally just staking the property. This means that the surveyor would go out, find the boundary points, and place stakes so that you know where the boundary points are. Typically when we have a contract, we want both staking and survey. The survey itself is a summary report of the boundary lines on the property, which would give you a report showing you where the property the boundary points are north, south, east, west, and then also showing you some of the improvements on the property like walls and things like that so that you can decide if something might be encroaching or maybe there's a fence that needs to be removed or something like that. When you get a copy of the survey report, it's going to come into two different sections. One is going to be the actual survey itself, which this would be considered the survey, which shows you the boundary points in relation to the street and the other neighboring lots. Okay, and then another part of the survey would be considered the summary portion. And the summary portion is the one that you want to take a really good look at, because this is what you're going to be looking to see if there's any kind of encroachments over the de minimis. And if you didn't already know what that means, de minimis means that anything over 0.5 is considered an encroachment. And if you do see anything like that, that's what would, key you into the fact that you need to get it either an encroachment agreement or you're going to need to get a variance or anything like that. But this is the survey report that you're going to be ordering if you're representing a seller, and if you're representing a buyer, this is what you're going to be looking at to make decisions on whether or not you have issues with the property and whether or not you want to move forward with encroachments or if you're going to be accepting of them. So once you get the survey report, you're going to decide that, oops, I'm going back here to the contract. Okay, so K2, you're going to check that. The survey includes staking and survey, so you don't need to worry about selecting K1. This will almost always be NA unless you already have a survey and you just want to restake the boundary points. Then, of course, you would just do NA here and check that box. We like to put in here no later than 21 days prior to the scheduled closing date, seller shall, at seller's sole cost and expense, have a land surveyor do a survey. 21 days is a good amount of time that once you do receive the survey, you'll have enough a period of time to review the survey, decide whether or not there are encroachments that need to be remedied, and then be able to relay your whatever your decision is with moving forward with the survey. And that would be K3, the boundary encroachment. This is the next section of the survey where the buyer has to let the seller know after they receive the survey what their intentions are. What do they want to do? Do they want to accept the survey as is and just close? Or do they want the seller to make the remedy? And there are all different types of remedies, but obviously if there's encroachments, the number one remedy is getting an encroachment agreement with the neighbor that's either encroaching on your lot or the seller getting an encroachment agreement with the neighboring lot that he's encroaching on. Whatever the case is, this next section talks about, let's go back a little bit here. This period of time right here is the period of time that the buyer has to let the seller know their intention. So 5 days from discovery, basically receiving the survey, the buyer has to tell the seller that whatever their intentions are going to be, whether they want encroachment agreements or whether they want to go ahead and move forward with everything. If they are wanting an encroachment agreement or a remedy to the encroachments, this is the next section, talks about how many days that the seller has to get those things accomplished. So if the buyer is requesting encroachment agreements, this is giving the seller 7 days to get encroachment agreements handled. Now, this is a typical period of time. This may not be enough time for a seller to do these things, but we don't know what the survey is going to show, so we really don't know what we have to deal with. So we really don't know how many days. So we kind of like to just put a 7-day typical time frame in here, but this could possibly be extended later should the seller require or need more time to get this to get encroachment agreements handled. This could also to really affect the closing if there are encroachments found. It's very important that when you are representing a seller to try to get the survey done within the listing period so that you're not stuck in this area during the escrow. So it would be really great if you were representing a buyer to ask a seller agent ahead of time if they have a survey, because that might help with the, you know, once you open escrow, you don't wait too long to remedy those issues. But again, this section talks about how long the seller has to remedy whatever the buyer's request was with regard to either encroachment agreements, or maybe they need to remove the wall. If it's a chain link fence, that's something that's pretty easily able to remove, but a rock wall could not be something that would be easily removed. But let's say a buyer is adamant about not having that encroachment there at all. They don't even want you to get an encroachment agreement. Removing a wall could cost like thousands of dollars, and a seller may refuse to do that. If the seller does refuse to do that, then of course they're not complying with it, and the buyer would then be able to cancel. So it says here that if the seller is not able to I guess complete these things, that the buyer would then be able to decide whether to accept the encroachments the way they are, or they would have the right to cancel. This next section talks about if for some reason there is an encroachment agreement, an encroachment that can be removed, like a chain link fence, or maybe it is a rock wall, but it's a very short rock wall that could be demolished pretty easily. If there's any kind of removal of the encroachment, this section talks about how many days from that encroachment being removed to redo the survey. So they're asking for the surveyor to come back out and resurvey that area within 5 days prior to closing. So these days could really kind of trip you up. So you might want to be a little bit careful with these dates in here. This is kind of making your offer stronger by providing a short period of time, but you never know what's going to happen. So you might want to maybe give a little longer here. Not sure why exactly this says 7. So I would typically maybe even put 10 days from receipt of the survey to clear up any encroachments. Obviously, if you get the survey back and there's no encroachments, then it's not even an issue. But if you have like a neighbor that is encroaching on this property and they live in Japan or on the mainland, it's going to take a lot longer to get an encroachment agreement done, because not only do you have to have the attorney draft the encroachment agreement, but then you have to mail it to the owner, and if they're not on island, that's going to take several days. And then what if that neighbor is not willing to sign the agreement? These encroachment agreements need to be notarized, and they will eventually be recorded with the property. Sometimes there are encroachment agreements that are recorded that are already completed, and they may not be something that was given to you at the beginning of your escrow. That 7 days to just pull up those recorded documents would be plenty of time. But again, this is the period of time that if you're asking a seller to remedy any encroachments, this may or may not be enough time. So I would maybe even consider putting 10 days in this box rather than 7. And K-4 talks about just the disclosure itself, that anything that would come up in a survey that was a discrepancy or some sort of encroachment, that it is an update to the disclosure, and they're just making that statement here in this paragraph. Okay, so that concludes the survey portion of page 8 and 9 of the purchase contract.